Hey everyone! Welcome back to Strange Mind 6. I'm your host Ruby, and today we're going to be reading more of Creepers, the Scarecrow by Edgar J. Hyde. And this time we're going to be reading Chapter 6, Believe Me. The last video, it was about David pretty much discovering Jonesy missing his tongue, the rooster that died, that his parents were saying probably fell off of the roof, was missing its tongue, and the creepy words that David found on the Scarecrow's head. Now, what was all of that? We don't know, and according to this chapter, the title is Believe Me, so I'm guessing that David tries to tell either his sisters or his parents and nobody believes him. That's one thing that I honestly think, you don't have to believe somebody, but if things aren't adding up and you feel that, okay, this is too much of a coincidence, maybe there is some truth to what they're saying. But it's sometimes good to do your own research. But without further ado, my dear friends, grab a snack, grab a drink, or sit back and relax. Hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's get into it. David's sister, Sarah, sat alone in the kitchen. The rest of the family had moved into the living room. David had to say something to somebody now. He could no longer keep all that he knew and had seen to himself, but he was still too afraid to talk to his dad. As David burst through the kitchen door, Sarah didn't even look up from her magazine. She was used to her brother scampering all over the house, running here and there, and a constant hurry. David was a walking noise machine. Sarah. David started, his voice lowered in an attempt to ensure no one in the next room heard what he was about to say. Sarah didn't lift her eyes from the magazine, but answered, "What?" "Sarah, listen to me. I have something really important to tell you." David continued. Sarah looked at her brother now. She had sensed something different in her brother's voice. As she looked at him, she could see the worry on his face. "What is it, David? You look terrible. Where have you been? I hope you haven't been messing with that dead rooster," Sarah said, wondering what was bothering her brother. "Sarah, listen to me. I'm gonna tell you something kind of unbelievable. You have to trust me, though. I need to tell somebody before I lose my mind." David related all the events. Sarah obviously knew the details about Morrison, but he told her about his 2 encounters with Jonesy. When David reached to the part of the story where he discovered that Jonesy had also lost his tongue, Sarah stood up. "David, stop it. You're scaring me," she snapped. "Shh, Sarah. I know." David went on. "I'm scared too. But I have to tell you, please, just listen." Sarah sat down. David told her about the rooster and the words written on the Scarecrow's head. He couldn't remember the words exactly, but he could remember their message. This Scarecrow was supposed to scare off anybody who threatened the farm. "David, this isn't funny. If you're messing with me, I'm gonna make sure that you regret it," Sarah demanded, not knowing whether to believe her brother or not. Certainly Sarah could see that her brother appeared to be seriously upset, but her brother had proved before that he could be as good as an actor as anyone. "Sarah, this is all true, honestly. You have to believe me," pleaded David. "David, do you realize what you're suggesting? Do you realize what all of this means if it's true?" Sarah asked nervously. "If this is true, it means our Scarecrow is running around scaring and maiming anyone who comes near our farm. Only those who threaten it," added David, going over the words in his mind. "But why the tongues? What's the point of missing tongues?" Sarah asked. "I'm not sure," replied David. "Maybe it's to try to stop them from saying what they've seen. Maybe. But what about the animals, the dog and the rooster? Why harm them?" David thought for a moment. He tried to remember the words on the Scarecrow's head. I think the words said something about threatening the farm's peace. Sandy was always barking, especially at night, and that rooster made a lot of noise. Maybe the Scarecrow saw them as a threat to the farm's peace. We brought them with us from the old farm, so maybe he thought he had to scare them off too," suggested David. He really was confused now, but he was more sure than ever that the farm Scarecrow had something to do with Morrison, old Jonesy, his dog, and the dead rooster. The words on the Scarecrow's head were the final confirmation. Sarah moved over to the kitchen window. The image of the Scarecrow was growing in her mind. She strained her eyes to make out the figure in the field through the darkness. Sarah spoke nervously. "David." Her voice began to tremble. "David, come here. Look." David joined her at the window and looked. "Oh no," he said under his breath. "Oh no." David ran to the kitchen door and spread across the yard toward the fence. His sister followed, but stayed a few feet behind. The two of them stared into the field, the empty field. The Scarecrow was gone. The spot where David had been only 10 minutes before was clear, except for the small pile of bricks. "What do we do now, David? I'm really scared," Sarah asked, almost in tears. David stared out into the empty field. He had to tell his dad now. Surely, when he saw the empty field, he would believe the Scarecrow was at the root of all this. David took his sister's arm, led her back to the kitchen. As they were entering the kitchen, they could hear someone coming in from the living room. "Hi, kids. What are you up to?" Mr. Davies asked, throwing his newspaper into the trash. "The game's starting in a minute, David." David didn't know where to start. He looked at Sarah's worried face. He had to tell them. "Dad," he stammered. "The Scarecrow." He hesitated, as he could see the expression on his dad's face change. He knew his dad would take some time to convince, but the missing Scarecrow would be the evidence. "Dad, look at the Scarecrow," David continued nervously. Mr. Davies was already standing at the kitchen sink, cleaning some dishes. Now, David, I don't want to hear any more of this Scarecrow business. That guy the other night was just a nutcase, Mr. Davies snapped. Dad, please, just look, David cried pleadingly. Okay, I'm looking, so what? Replied Mr. Davies. Dad, can't you see? The Scarecrow is missing, David said, almost begging his father to acknowledge what he and his sister had seen. David, what are you talking about? It's right there, where it normally is. What's gotten into you today? Mr. Davies replied, putting the towel in his hand over the chair and heading back to the living room. David went over to the window and looked out. Sarah joined them. They both looked out again into the darkness, toward the field where they had been to only a few minutes ago. The Scarecrow was there, standing still in its usual position. Chapter 7. The Banker is the next video, my dear friends. So tune in next video and we will see what is going on and why is it that David and his sister Sarah saw the Scarecrow move. Did they mess up? Did they disturb the peace of the farm? Or is the Scarecrow going to get them? This has been Ruby, signing off.